Hello guys, this is Miss McCutcheon. I'm going over your start prep for this week. So number one says Jamal wants to draw a right triangle and label it JKL. He has already plotted points J and L. The location of point K is 10 units away from point J, 12 units away from point L. Which coordinate pair could be the location of point K? So one thing you want to always notice when you are using a coordinate plane is your units and what you're counting by on your X and Y axis. So in this particular case, we're counting by twos. So that's important to know. I went ahead and plotted A, B, C, and D, each of the order pairs they gave me, and I'm going to count up to J first to see which one is actually 10 units away. So if you start at A and count up to J, as you count up, you go to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. And that's more than 10, so that will not work for that one. If you go to B and start at B and count up to J, you get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Once again, that's more than 10, so B is not going to work. If you go over to C and count up to J, you just go to 4. That's too little, not enough, because it's supposed to be 10 units away. So it should be D, but we're going to check it and make sure. D, if we go over to J from D, 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, it does work there. I'm going to go ahead and count down to L and make sure it's 12 units away. So you'll do that and get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and so D does work. Sorry, this picture is a little blurry, but you have the paper in front of you, so you should be able to read it. It says, Mr. Lee has a small apple orchard. There are 7 rows of trees within trees in each row, which two expressions show different ways to find the total number of trees in Mr. Lee's apple orchard. So one thing I did was I circled total, because when you annotate, you circle those words. Total means to add. So that means my answer should probably have some addition in it somewhere. So that's why I went ahead and marked off, make it a little bit bigger for you guys. I went ahead and marked off C and D because C and D shows me multiplying the ends instead of adding the ends. And total means to add. So once again, if I mark off C and D, I'm down to only A or B being my correct choice. One thing I wrote over here on the side, if you notice here, is something that we know. Repeated addition is the same thing as multiplication. So if I think of 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 6, that's the same thing as 2 times 3 equaling 6. So if you think of that, then the one that makes sense to be right would be B, because if I add 7 n's together, that's the same thing as multiplying 7 times n. One thing I also did is I plugged in a value for n. So we know n is a variable. Variables take the place of a number. So I just plugged in a value for n. So I plugged in 1. And if I plug in 1 for A and I add up all those n's, I get 7. But if I do 7 plus n or plug in 1 for n and do 7 plus 1, I get 8. 7 and 8 don't match. That's another reason why A doesn't work. If I plug in 1 for the B answer, if I plug in 1 for all those n's, I get 7. And then if I plug in 1 for n and do 7 times 1, I also get 7. So that's why B is correct. Okay, number 3 is a box and whisker plot. It says, a newspaper editor monitored the number of visits to his website for 13 consecutive hours. The list below shows the number of visits for each of the 13 hours. They give us our data. Then the question asks which box plot correctly displays the data about the number of visits to the editor's webpage. When you make a box and whisker plot, or a box plot as it calls it here, you have to find 5 pieces of data. You have to find the lower value, which is the smallest number. You have to find the upper value, which is the biggest number. You have to find the median. The median is the middle number, the middle of the set of the data. After you find the median, it will literally split your data in half. So you find the median of the lower half of the data, that's the lower quartile. You find the median of the upper half of the data, that's the upper quartile. So I have all my work shown here, so I'm going to explain it to you. First thing you do is put your numbers in order from least to greatest. So I listed all the numbers. If you notice up here, I put an X over the numbers as I use them. That's a good way to check to make sure you didn't leave any numbers out. Because if you notice, we have 2 5s, we have 2 8s, we have 2 9s. It's very easy to leave a number out if you don't have some type of check system to make sure you included all the numbers. I also circled that 13 up here to show that there's 13 numbers. So when I create my list, I always like to count and make sure I have 13 numbers in my list. The first thing, easy to identify. The lower value, the smallest number is 2, so I wrote that down there. The upper value, the biggest number is 15, I wrote that down there. Then we have 13 numbers, so you're going to have one single middle number. So a lot of people like to start at each end and count in. And if you do that, you end up with 8. So 8, I put a box around it in the middle. That's my median. Now, once again, once I have my median, I have a lower half and an upper half of data. So the lower half of the data, I put a box around it. It goes from 2 up to 8. I find the median of that data. Because I have 6 numbers, there are going to be 2 middle numbers. So you add the 2 middle numbers and divide by 2. You basically find their average or their mean. So 5 plus 5 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. The lower quartile is 5. Now, once again, the upper half of the data, after I split it by the median, goes from 9 to 15. The 2 middle numbers there is 11 and 12. 11 and 12, when you add them, is 23. You divide by 2 and get 11 and a half. So I wrote all those numbers here, and that's what I'm going to graph on my box plot. So the first thing I did was go and check to make sure the lower and upper value were the same. And I put the numbers above each of the little lines. Each line represents one of the numbers that I have listed below. And so I basically just went through each one and double checked it. A, B, C, and D have an upper value of 15 and a lower value of 2. So that didn't help me figure anything out. The next number I went to was the median 8. So the median is the middle number here, 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 and here. That's the median. I went ahead and marked out A and B because they had 7 and 9 for their medians, and that would not work for me. So I knew that wouldn't work. So I was left with C and D being my only 2 choices. So I went to the lower quartile to see where the lower quartile was, and they both had a lower quartile of 5. That didn't help me figure out the answer. So I went to the upper quartile, and it had an upper quartile of 11 and a half. D has an upper quartile of 10 and a half, so I knew that wasn't right. C had an upper quartile of 11 and a half, so I knew that C was correct. Okay, number 4 says a worker will install carpet on the shaded part of the rectangular floor pictured below. The question, they gave us a picture of the floor space with the shaded areas. And then it says the question, what is the total amount of carpet in square yards the worker needs? So one thing I underlined at the very beginning was the shaded part. I'm going to put carpet on every shaded part. So what I did was I looked at the shapes that made up my shaded part, and I recognized that I'm going to have a rectangle and 2 triangles that make up the shaded part. To find the area of a rectangle, you do area equals length times width. So if you look at the rectangle, the length and width are 5 and 3. So I did 5 times 3, and I got 15 yards squared, or square yards. Now I have my two triangles, and I noticed that the 2 triangles are going to have the same base and height. So I can basically find the area of one triangle and then just multiply by 2. And that's what I did. So to find the area of one triangle, you do area equals half base times height. Well, the base and height of my triangle are 2 and 5. So I did 2 times 5 and got 10. I took half of 10, or 10 divided by 2, and got 5 yards squared. Once again, that's for just one triangle. So I did 5 times 2 to get the area of both triangles, and that would be 10 yards squared. This word, total, is also very important. Total, we already talked about earlier, means to add. So at the end, I have to add the area of the rectangle and the 2 triangles together to get 25, and that's why B is the correct answer. Question number 5 says, if only the values within the brackets are substituted for D, which list contains only values that would make the inequality D plus 2 3/4 is less than 15 true? Some keywords there are substituted, which means I'm going to plug in those numbers in for D. So each of the numbers they give me, I'm going to plug in for D. And we're looking for words or numbers rather that are going to make the inequality true. So we want answers that are going to be less than 15. So what I did down here, and you have a calculator, so this should have been somewhat simple math. Hopefully most of you guys know how to use the ABC button to push in your fractions. So for A, so I just went through and started plugging in each one of those values. So I started with 6.5. So on my calculator, I did 6.5 plus 2 ABC 3 ABC 4, and I pushed enter. And when I got my answer, I got 9.25 is less than 15. That is correct. So I knew that 6.5 worked, so I put a check above it. I went down to 10. I did 10 plus 2 and 3/4. So on my calculator, I did 10 plus 2 ABC 3 ABC 4. Push enter, got 12 and 3/4. Honestly, you don't even have to use a calculator on that, but if you did, you would get 12 and 3/4. 12 and 3/4 is less than 15. I checked it and put a check above 10 in my list. Then I went to 12 and a half plus 12 and 3/4. So I did 12 ABC 1 ABC 2 plus 2 ABC 3 ABC 4. I pushed enter and I got 15 and 1/4. Well, 15 and 1/4 is not less than 15, so I knew that wouldn't work and I put an X. And then I realized, well, 16 and a half is bigger than 15. So if I add something to it, it's still going to be bigger, so that wouldn't work. Then I realized that 17 and 3/4 is already bigger than 15. So if I add something to it, it's still going to be bigger, so that wouldn't work. So the only numbers that work in that list is 6.5 and 10. So if you got all 5 of them right, dab on them. Get you some cash. Good job, guys.